Test, can you hear me in the back? You got it, thank you. Welcome, everybody. Okay, we're going to get started right now. We're going to have engines starting here at noon. I want to welcome you. My name is Jim Llano. I'm a docent here with Planes of Fame. Your pilot today is John Hinton. John has been a long-time pilot, starting very early here at Planes of Fame. He's a restorer as well, and he will be flying your Mrs. Virginia today. I'll make some other comments about John a little bit later in the talk, but we'll have a brief Q&A when John comes down. We have a window of opportunity right now, so we're hoping that this is going to hold. So just a few comments. I'm going to run through a brief history of this airplane, and then I will make some remarks specific to this particular airplane as well. So number one, getting started back in 1940, the British government was looking for a manufacturer to build under license the Curtiss P-40. So those of you that are familiar with the P-40, we have one in the hangar here. The cowling is off of it. You can see that that airplane compared to the Mustang is quite different. And the British government approached North American Aviation that had just located to Inglewood here in Southern California to build the Curtiss P-40 under license. Being a young company, being ambitious, being looking at what they could do rather than building someone's airplane, they said, no, we will build you an airplane, but we'll build you a plane from our design. The problem, the British were desperate for fighters, and they were looking for something within about 3 months, and they had come to North American Aviation because North American Aviation was known for their manufacturing process, for their efficiency, for their organization. And it was this that also helped North American Aviation then with the idea that they could build this airplane in about 100 days or so. It wasn't just that they could build it in 100 days. It was the fact that one of their chief engineers, Edgar Schmood, who was here in 1981 for Planes of Fame Mustang Day, he spoke at the event. And he had mentioned that he had been trained as an engineer in Germany. He had worked in Germany as an aero designer, done the same in Brazil, eventually ended up in Southern California working for very young North American Aviation. During that time as well, this is the late 30s, he was one of the few aeronautical engineers who had been able to see a BF-109 that had been shot down, captured by the U.S. brought it back. It had been shot down during the Spanish Civil War. He was one of the few that was able to examine it. So his response on that day here at the Planes of Fame was, yes, it was built in 100 days, but I had been designing it for 5 years. So that helped quite a bit. What North American did in designing the plane, they took the engine from the P-40, which is an Allison 1710, and they built an entirely new aircraft around that engine. So they started with number one, the radiator, which typically in the P-40 you'll see it's quite large. It's right in front, a lot of drag. North American pulled it back aft quite a bit. They also then lowered that intake so that it would not the airflow coming in would not interfere with turbulence just below the wing area. Number two, they incorporated a brand new wing design, which the camber is the same on the top as it is on the bottom, which means the curvature is relatively the same on the top and as the bottom. And what that did, it provided less drag. It brought the turbulence area on the wings further back, and that added to speed, and that, of course, then added to the distance that the plane could fly much more effectively. They also made a very flush fuselage. All the rivets and screws were flush, so that added to the aerodynamic ability of the airplane as well. And another point is that these aeronautical engineers at North American, rather than using artistic drawings and basing their design off of that, they use mathematical equations and building a conical type shape to the fuselage. The British were ecstatic with the plane when they received it. It was highly effective, below 15,000 feet, not so much above that. But it was also, in comparison to the Spitfire Mark IV, which is a contemporary at that time, this plane was actually much faster, maybe 30, 35 miles per hour, much faster. The British ended up using it as reconnaissance and as a ground attack airplane. And they had originally ordered around 320 of these. Meanwhile, the United States was not that interested in supporting a new fighter at the time. And again, this is just in the very early days of the war, 1940, 1941, into 42. But they did receive a couple of XP-51s for evaluation. In order to keep North American productivity functioning, North American found an attack contract for an attack airplane, attack fighter. And through negotiation with the executives of North American and with the United States Army Air Force, they developed a dive bomber, so to speak. It was the A-36. So they took the frame, the fuselage, they strengthened it, which added weight. They incorporated hard points under the wings, so each wing could carry a 500-pound bomb. They also added 50 caliber in the nose area and 250 calibers in the wings, and of course they added the dive brakes as well. So I believe there were around 300 of those that were ordered, and that kept production for North American going. So it wasn't until 1942 that the United States Air Force finally came around and saw the benefit of the P-51A and put an order for initially 1,200 airplanes at that time. But both the British and the American government recognized the weakness in the airplane with the Allison engine. Again, its capability and its function was highly efficient at to about 15,000 feet. But by 1942, 1943, most of the combat is up twice that high. You've got bombers going in, you need escorts, and so you needed planes that could get up to that altitude. The British already had the Merlin engine, which was being used in the Spitfire. This Allison engine was a single stage, which didn't allow it to get to that high. The Merlin engine was a two-stage turbocharger and two-speed, and that was much more efficient. So both the British government and U.S. government looked at how they could modify the P-51A utilizing those engines. Ultimately, they were successful, and that led to the P-51B, P-51C, and the icon of all of them, the P-51D. Where did these planes see service? They saw service throughout most of the theaters, but the P-51 saw most of their service in the Chinese, Burma, India theater. And it's this paint job to that group. The paint scheme here, this is Virginia, was the airplane of Colonel Philip Cochrane, who was a co-commander of the 1st Air Combat Group in that theater, the China, Burma, India theater. Their job was to supply troops that were behind enemy lines in China and those other areas. They would fly escort. The group had gliders to transport troops. They had C-47s for cargo, other airplanes. So the P-51s were used as escorts and ground attack to support those troops. This airplane was acquired from the Grand Central Airport located in Glendale. And they had an institute there. It was the Cal Aero Institute of Aviation. So they trained technicians, they trained mechanics. The plane was built in this particular plane was built in 1943 and served in that function up until 1959 when the airport ultimately closed. And that's when we acquired the airplane. And it was a static display with us for a number of years up until 1981. And that's when Steve Hinton, our president of Planes of Fame, took it upon himself with the team that he led to restore this airplane to flight. They did, and the paint scheme that they chose at that time was in honor of the Royal Air Force for the British. They also took that plane and they raced it at the Reno National Air Races. Has anyone here been to the Reno National Air Races? Well, you probably know this is the last year. So if you have an opportunity, please go up. We'll have Wee Willie there. We'll have Span as well. But Steve raced this plane under the Royal Air Force scheme in 1981. In 2006, the plane needed another restoration. And it was your pilot, John Hinton, Steve's brother, who took on that role. And he led the team in restoring the plane again. And it was John's team that chose this paint scheme, again in honor of those that flew in the Chinese Burma India theater. This plane as well has been in the movies. One that brings to mind, which is Iron Eagle 3. I think that was out quite a few years ago.
Wow.
So anyway, we have just a brief history there for you. So with that, we will have an opportunity for a Q&A afterwards, and John will hopefully fly here for 15 minutes or so. We'll just watch the weather here. Well, right now it looks really quite good. So with that, I will close. Perhaps I can answer a quick question maybe from here.
Okay, everybody, we're going to see Mrs. Virginia, the P-51A startup with John Hinton. Getting checked right now, the canopy. Here, I'll get down so you can see.
Oh, no, I'll go down so you can say hi.
All right. A little flyover going on. It's a jack. Oh, all right, there he goes.